Okay, I'm still Darcy Gould, and this is another bronze that I made after Belpool, and this one's called Nova Albion. It's about Sam Ball's book, The Secret Voyage of Sir Francis Drake, and the gist of the book was that when Drake sailed around the world from 1577 to 1580, after he'd gone down through the Atlantic Oceans, through the Straits of Magellan, and up the west coast of South America, where he stole 40 tons of gold and silver from the Spaniards to the point where he used the gold and silver for ballast in his ship. He said he went to the area around San Francisco, where San Francisco is now, and started the first English colony called Nova Albion. But Sam did a whole bunch of research and decided what Drake was really up to was he was much farther north, and he was looking for the entrance to the Northwest Passage, and this would have been on the secret orders of Queen Elizabeth I. And this was when the Queen or the King was the boss, and she was the boss, and there's no doubt about it. Anyway, Nova Albion, this supposed first English colony that he said was around San Francisco, was actually on Vancouver Island. So here's Elizabeth I, and here's Drake's ship, and she's pointing at Vancouver Island on the globe here and giving the shush signal. And I've always been fascinated with octopuses, or should I say octopi, to the point where I used to drive my Australian son wild talking about them. When he was little, he'd go, "No more talking about octopuses, Dad." So this was a perfect excuse to make an octopus, because when Drake left England, he sailed down the west coast of Europe and Africa, across the doldrums in the South Atlantic, farther than any English ship had ever gone before. And not one of the 160 or so crew doubted that these waters were the haunts and habitats of demons and sea monsters. So a giant octopus fit right in, and it's already snagged one of the smaller ships, because one small ship couldn't handle the storms around Cape Horn and didn't make it. Another one turned back. So there's a lot of 16th century symbols in here. The eyes and ears on her arm, and they're inside on this arm too, were 16th century symbols of fame. However, a friend of mine, who has a stepbrother. The stepbrother is an inspector for Scotland Yard, and he was over and he saw the brochure, and he said, you know, there would have been a double meaning to that, because Elizabeth had the world's first spy master, Lord Burleigh, and she had eyes and ears everywhere. And I went, okay. Now, the snake on her arm, I copied every portrait of Elizabeth that I could find, and one of the major ones, she had this embroidered Celtic snake on her sleeve with a heart in its mouth. So the snake was a 16th century symbol of wisdom, but the heart in the mouth, I could find no reference to it. Now, I called up a friend of mine who's an old boy who's very knowledgeable, John Bome, and asked him what he thought the heart in the mouth was about. And we talked about this for a while, and he said that hearts were always symbols of love. And we already knew the snake was a symbol of wisdom. And Elizabeth would have been the most eligible bachelorette in Europe at the time, but her many suitors were not after her for love, they're after her for her power. Because if she married, her husband would become king, she would lose her power to her husband. It was not like Victoria 3 centuries later, who had a consort. And this is the main reason she never married. So he came to the conclusion that she guarded her heart with wisdom. And I called up Sam Ball and ran that past him, and he said, Oh yeah, that's good. That's good. That's the way they thought. Yeah, yeah. That works. That'll fly. Sure. That's good. And so here it is, and here she's got a crown with a cross on the top. And often they had crosses on their crowns. And I think this came from about the year 1000, when the divine right of kings that was established by the church, because during the Dark Ages there was just a constant state of warfare amongst all these petty little fiefdoms and kingdoms and whatever, and the church was the only stabilizing influence. So they came up with the idea that the king was God's representative on earth, which was the only way that they could figure out how to put an end to the constant state of warfare. So, you know, people might rebel against their king, but in those days, to rebel against God's representative on earth, well, that was something a lot of people weren't willing to do. So the cross was on her crown just to remind people. And this would have been a tradition by this time that was almost 450 years old, just so nobody forgot that she was the divine right of, she was God's representative on earth, which was now going out of style, but it was tradition anyway. And that's about the size of this piece. I made it out of wax. I had to make 31 different molds. It came back from the foundry in 53 different pieces, and it took me 6 months to put it back together again, because I'm the only one that knows exactly how to do it. And I keep the wax masters. Even in the foundry couldn't put it back together, even if I could have afforded to pay them, which I couldn't. So it was a formidable undertaking. And I was very pleased when it was finally done.